Try to imagine nothing at all, not empty space, not quiet darkness, but true nothing. No air, no light, no particles, no substance of any kind, just total absence. You cannot actually do it. You might think you can, but what appears in your mind is always something. You imagine blackness, you imagine a void, yet blackness is still a thing and a void is still a place. The moment you picture emptiness, you have already created space. And space, it turns out, is very much something. This is where reality starts to feel uncomfortable. This is where your instincts stop working and your intuition completely breaks down. So here is the puzzle. What actually lies between atoms? In school, you were told that everything is built from atoms. Fair enough. And you probably imagine them as tiny solid beads pressed together to form objects. But that picture is completely wrong. They are not packed together at all. They are not even remotely close. Vast stretches of space separate them, enormous compared to the atoms themselves. So what is inside that space? Most people answer nothing, an empty gap. The atoms are the substance, and the space between them is just emptiness, pure separation, nothing happening there at all. That idea is false, entirely false. Between every atom in your body, between every atom in this room, between every atom anywhere in the universe, there is something present, something real, something physical, something that carries energy, produces forces, and quietly holds the whole universe together. Let me make this concrete. Place your hand on a table. Do it right now if one is nearby. Feel that resistance? Solid, unmoving. Your hand stops and the table stops. It feels like the simplest interaction imaginable. But here is the strange part. Your hand never actually touches the table. The atoms in your hand never meet the atoms in the wood. They do not even come close. Around every atom is a cloud of electrons, negative charges circling the nucleus. As your hand approaches the table, the electrons in your hand move toward the electrons in the table. Negative facing negative. Same charge meeting the same charge. And identical charges do only one thing. They repel, they push away from each other, they refuse absolutely to share the same space. So what you are feeling when you touch that table, that sense of hardness, that pressure, that sudden stop, it is not atoms colliding with atoms. It is electrical repulsion. Fields pushing back against other fields. The electrons in your hand move close enough to the electrons in the table that their electric fields begin to clash. Not allowed, not closer. This space is already occupied. Your brain translates that electromagnetic pushback into the feeling of touch, into solidity, into contact. But there is still a gap. There is always a gap. The atoms in your hand and the atoms in the table never actually meet. They never touch. They remain separated by an invisible barrier of electric force. You are floating right now, whether you realize it or not. You are not truly resting on your chair. You are hovering above it, held up by electromagnetic repulsion, balanced on an unseen cushion of force. You have been floating your entire life. Every time you believed you were touching something, you were actually suspended just above it. Now connect this back to the question we started with. What exists between atoms? A field, an electric field, an electromagnetic field, and this is not nothing. People get this wrong constantly. They assume fields are just math tricks, tools for equations, convenient abstractions. They are not. The field is real. It occupies space. It carries energy. It has momentum. It acts. Every charged particle, every electron, every proton produces an electric field that spreads outward in every direction, not just locally, but infinitely far, fading with distance, yet never fully vanishing. In theory, the electric field from a single electron in your fingertip reaches across the entire universe. That means atoms are not tiny standalone objects drifting in emptiness. They are the focal points of fields that extend outward, overlap, and continuously interact. The space between atoms is not empty at all. It is filled with field, stacked layer upon layer, with electromagnetic influence. And when you look at matter, when you see something that feels solid, what you are actually encountering is a tightly woven network of overlapping fields, electrons pushing against electrons, creating the sensation of solidity through pure electromagnetic force. The substance is not the atoms themselves. The substance is the field. Atoms are simply the regions where those fields become strong, where the activity is concentrated. But the fields spread everywhere, filling the space between every atom in your body. Right now, fields are pulling and pushing, preserving structure, holding molecules together, keeping you from falling apart or bursting outward. Chemical bonds, the forces that link atoms into molecules, are electromagnetic fields at work. The architecture of matter is the architecture of fields. So the answer to what lies between atoms is already clear. It is not nothing. It is field. It is electromagnetic influence. It is the unseen fabric that makes touch feel real by preventing actual contact. You never truly touch anything because something always stands between you and everything else, and that something is the field. But this is where it becomes even more unsettling. We have already seen that the space between atoms is filled with fields, electromagnetic fields spreading out from every charged particle, overlapping and interacting, forming the unseen framework that holds reality together. But that is still not the full picture. The truly strange part comes next. Let me pose a question. What happens if you remove all the atoms? Not just a few, but every single one. You take a region of space and extract every particle of matter, every atom, every molecule, every trace of dust. You create the most perfect vacuum imaginable. Now ask yourself what remains. Nothing, right? That is what a vacuum is supposed to be. That is what empty means. You removed everything, so nothing should be left. So here is the twist. Physics says that idea is wrong. Reality simply will not tolerate emptiness. The universe does not permit true nothingness to exist anywhere ever. This comes from quantum mechanics, from something known as the uncertainty principle. Most people have heard that phrase, but they think it only means that observing something changes it. That is part of the story, but not the core of it. The uncertainty principle says certain pairs of quantities can never be perfectly fixed at the same time. Position and momentum, for example. You cannot know both exactly, but there is another pair that matters even more here, energy and time. You cannot have a region of space with absolutely zero energy for any stretch of time. It is not allowed. The equations forbid it. Perfect emptiness would require perfect precision, exactly zero energy. And quantum mechanics responds with a flat refusal. Nature does not allow that kind of exactness. So what happens instead is this. The vacuum does not stay calm, even when nothing is inside it. Even after every particle has been removed, space itself refuses to sit still. It trembles, it flickers. Out of that restlessness, pairs of particles suddenly appear, from nowhere, from what looks like nothing. A particle and its opposite, an electron and a positron, a quark and an antiquark. They burst into existence on their own. They last for an unbelievably short instant, so brief it barely makes sense to talk about time at all. Then they collide, annihilate each other, and disappear as if they were never there. These are called virtual particles. Virtual because you can never grab them, never trap them, never hold them long enough to inspect. They vanish too quickly, but they are real, and they leave behind real, measurable effects. So now the obvious question comes up. Where does that energy come from? You are not supposed to create particles from nothing. That would break the rule of energy conservation. Something should not appear out of nowhere. Fair question, a very fair one. But this is how nature gets away with it. The uncertainty principle allows energy to be borrowed from nothing as long as it is returned quickly enough. The shorter the time window, the more energy can be borrowed. Virtual particles flash into existence on this borrowed energy, exist for a tiny instant, then annihilate and repay the energy before the universe can object. It is like taking cash from a register, making a purchase, then putting the money back before anyone checks the accounts. As long as the books balance in the end, it is allowed. At the quantum level, nature runs on credit, borrowing and repaying energy everywhere all the time. And this is not just a theory or a mathematical trick. This is something we can actually observe. There is an experiment called the Casimir effect that shows empty space is not truly empty. You take two metal plates, extremely thin and perfectly flat, and place them incredibly close together inside a vacuum, almost touching but not quite. A tiny gap remains between them, and they move, they pull toward each other. This is not gravity, which is far too weak at that scale. It is not static electricity either, because nothing is charged. The plates are neutral. The space between them is supposedly empty. There should be no force at all. And yet they are drawn together, pulled inward, pressed by nothing, driven by empty space itself. And so why do virtual particles matter here? Virtual particles behave like waves, each with its own wavelength, like ripples on water. When the plates are extremely close together, some of those wavelengths simply cannot fit in the gap. Those virtual particles cannot appear there because there is not enough space for their wave patterns. As a result, fewer virtual particles exist between the plates than outside them. Outside, quantum activity is higher. Inside, it is lower. That imbalance creates pressure, more push from the outside than from the inside. The plates are driven together. This effect has been measured with great precision. The force matches exactly what quantum theory predicts. Empty space applies pressure. The vacuum itself pushes on matter. Now consider what this means for the question we started with. What exists between atoms? Fields, yes, but those fields are not calm or inactive. The space between atoms, already filled with electromagnetic fields, is also alive with virtual particles flashing into existence and vanishing again, borrowing energy and returning it billions of times every second. The apparent emptiness inside matter is anything but empty. It is the most active environment imaginable, with creation and destruction happening constantly at scales too small and too fast to see directly, and this is not limited to the atoms in your body. The space between here and the moon behaves the same way. So does the space between stars, between galaxies. Everywhere, virtual particles flicker in and out. The vacuum itself churns with activity. There is no truly silent place in the universe. There is no region where nothing happens. You cannot find true emptiness. Nowhere in the cosmos does absolute nothing exist. Physics simply does not permit it. Even though the vacuum roils with virtual particles and the space between atoms hums with fields and quantum motion, true emptiness exists nowhere at all. Now pull all of this together and look at what it actually implies. People tend to think of the vacuum as absence, as the leftover state when everything interesting is removed, a dull backdrop where real things take place. But that picture is completely upside down. The vacuum is not absence, it is the foundation. It is not what is left after everything is taken away. It is what everything emerges from. The vacuum is the lowest energy state of reality itself, the calmest arrangement the fields filling space can achieve. And even in that calmest state, it can never be perfectly still. So here is the idea that really bends your intuition. Particles are not bits of stuff sitting inside empty space. Particles are what fields do. A particle is simply a disturbance in a field, a vibration, a spot where the field oscillates more strongly than its quiet background state. An electron is not a tiny object resting inside an electromagnetic field. The electron is the electromagnetic field itself, concentrated, energized, behaving more intensely than usual. And these fields are everywhere, not only where particles appear, but everywhere at once. The entire universe is saturated with overlapping fields stretching through all of space. What we call particles are just the locations where those fields become excited. Now consider what this implies for you, for what you actually are. You are built from atoms. Those atoms are mostly empty space, yet that space is saturated with fields. Those fields are alive with quantum fluctuations, and the particles themselves, the electrons and quarks that seem so concrete, are nothing more than excitations of deeper fields. There is no final layer, no ultimate foundation, no solid substance beneath everything else. Each time you zoom in searching for the basic building block, the ground beneath you dissolves. Atoms are mostly empty. The emptiness is filled with fields. The fields ripple with fluctuations. The particles are patterns in those fields all the way down, and it is like searching for the bottom of a lake and realizing there is no bottom at all, only water descending endlessly, growing stranger and darker the deeper you go, but never turning into rock. Eventually you have to accept that there is no rock. There is only motion, only activity, only events unfolding. The universe is not built from stuff. It is built from processes. Matter is not substance resting inside empty space. Matter is space in action, a particular arrangement of the same fields that define the vacuum itself. You and the empty space beside you are made from the same underlying thing, the same fields, the same quantum groundwork. The difference is arrangement. You are a pattern that endures, a ripple that keeps moving, a fluctuation complex enough to stop and ask what it is made of. And there is something even stranger to notice. Those fields link everything together. The electromagnetic field inside your body is the very same field as the electromagnetic field inside a star 10 billion light years away. Not a duplicate, not a similar version, but one continuous field stretching across all of space. Particles are simply the spots where that universal field becomes active in an interesting way. Between those spots, the field does not vanish. It continues, softer, but still there. You are not separate from the universe. You cannot be. You are a local pattern in fields with no boundaries, fields that extend everywhere, fields that connect everything to everything else. So returning to the original question, what exists between atoms? Fields, real physical fields that carry energy and produce forces, virtual particles rising out of the quantum vacuum, motion that never pauses, fluctuations that never settle, potential filling every point in space. Not emptiness, never emptiness. The space between atoms is made of the same thing as the atoms themselves, just in a calmer state. When you reach out and touch something, you do not cross a gap of nothingness. You move through fields. Your fields interact with other fields. Electromagnetic repulsion gives you the feeling of contact, but there is no empty space to pass through. It is fields all the way down. The solid world you believe you inhabit and the empty space you think surrounds it are actually the same thing. Both are field. The only difference is intensity, pattern, how much activity is happening in a given place. And when this finally clicks, when it truly settles in, reality starts to look different. The world stops appearing as solid objects floating in empty space. It reveals itself as what it really is. A network of interacting fields, patterns forming and dissolving, motion that never ends. No sharp boundaries anywhere. No genuine emptiness anywhere. Everything linked to everything else by the very substance it is made from. You are made from that. A short-lived, intricate ripple in fields that existed long before you and will remain long after. The space within you and the space stretching between galaxies is the same space, built from the same fields, behaving according to the same rules. The difference is only the arrangement. That is the answer. That is what lies between atoms. Not nothing, but something that turns out to be the very same thing atoms are made from. There is no true between at all. There is only field everywhere, shifting through different states of excitement. And what we call matter is simply where those fields are most active. So can you picture nothing now? Real nothing. Absolute absence. You still cannot, and now you understand why. Nothing has never existed. The universe does not allow emptiness. Even the calmest, farthest, most deserted region of space is alive with motion, saturated with possibility, unwilling to stay still. Reality is not made of objects surrounded by void. Reality is field. The field is everywhere, and everywhere something is always happening. That is what lies between atoms. That is what lies between everything. And once this idea takes hold, it does not let go. The solid world fades into restless motion, and what looked like emptiness reveals itself as the most active place there is.